Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Advancing the AAPI Workforce Through Global Skills Initiatives panel. Thank you for joining us today as we talk with industry experts to learn more about this issue. I have to say, being that I'm in DC with the snow today, this panel might not have happened. And so virtual setting allows us to do this now more often and doing it more than usual. So appreciate everyone who's tuning in today. To get us started, I am thrilled to introduce Stephanie J. Peters, Senior Director of Congressional Affairs for the House of Representatives at Microsoft, who will be introducing Congressman Ted Lieu today. Stephanie?
And I have to give my apologies that I am not on camera, but we know in this virtual world, this happens. And I know we are limited in time. One of the best things that I love about my job is I get to be the company liaison with House members who are Democrats. Congressman Liu, from the day he joined Congress, has been a wonderful advocate, and not only an advocate, but his substantive knowledge of cybersecurity, intellectual property, and the convergence of all of these policy issues, including the issue of workforce that we will talk about today, has been phenomenal. So with that, I will turn it over to the Congressman. Thank you, and we look forward to working with you on this and many other issues next Congress.
Thank you, Stephanie, for that wonderful introduction, and really appreciate working with you over the years and for all your tremendous advocacy for Microsoft. And thank you, Madeline, for your leadership at Apex. And I'm really honored to be on this panel today. And workforce is a huge deal in the United States. I remember looking at this issue when I was in the California State Legislature. At the time, I was actually chair of their aerospace select committee in California. And I remember Raytheon came up and testified, and they said that their CEO does not lose sleep at night because of regulations or taxes or other issues, lost sleep because the CEO could not fill the open positions that the company had. And so we see that at not just aerospace companies, but tech companies, biotech companies, a number of other industries where on any given day, there are open positions that these companies cannot fill. And we need to do a lot to make sure that we can match the workforce needs that these companies have with the kind of people that were graduating from college. And it doesn't even have to be from a four-year college. When we looked at this, there were a number of positions that if you went and got a two-year degree at a community college, you could be utilized and get a six-figure job. And so we just need to make sure that we can continue to drill into people the importance of getting at least a two-year degree, if not a four-year degree, for many of these industries. Because as we continue marching along in the 21st century, it's pretty clear that the days of when you can just have a high school degree and have a pretty good middle-class life, those are far and few between. There's very few jobs like that are remaining. And that's one reason I support free college for all, but at a minimum, at least let's do free community college. I think that's eminently doable, and that would be important to making a workforce better. In addition, I think it's also important that we reform our immigration system until we can build up the organic workforce in the United States to a level that our companies need. We're going to continue to need people from around the world that have these skills, and I think it's important to keep that flow into our country. So with that, happy to listen to what other panelists have to say, and thanks for having me on.
Thank you, Congressman Lieu. For those of you joining us on Facebook, please put your questions in the comment section. And if you're joining the webinar, please use the Q&A chat box feature. Let's start with the panelists who have joined us today. I'd like for each of them to introduce themselves and the organization or company that they're with, and why you care about this issue. So to get us started, I'd like to welcome Naria.
Great, thank you so much. And thank you, Congressman Lieu, for so much support over the years. It's really an honor to have a chance to speak with all of you. I am an immigrant, Korean American, and a lot of the remarks that the Congressman said very much resonated with me. I think so key and critical. I work for Microsoft Philanthropies, and I have the very distinct honor and pleasure of leading our digital inclusion strategy as well as U.S. community engagement. And I'll be able to touch on a few of those topics today. We have a very bold ambition within Philanthropies to really think about that last mile to employment for individuals who are furthest from technology opportunity, potentially at risk of being displaced by technology, and just, generally have not had the same shot at, the bright future as some other populations. So we're really looking forward to skilling those groups with AI, computing, digital and productivity skills, and making sure that they're connected to jobs and those really high growth, high wage jobs that we know will exist into the future. We have partnered with LinkedIn to launch a big initiative to skill 25 million people with more digital skills for the COVID economy. And we'll share more about that, I'm sure, during the panel. But again, thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Naria, which is a good segue to welcoming our next panelist, Guy.
Thanks, Madalena. Thanks, Apex, for having me. I'm Guy Berger. I'm principal economist at LinkedIn. And it's interesting. Naria mentioned that she's an immigrant. I'm also an immigrant. I moved here in the late 80s because my dad, who's an engineer, got an amazing job opportunity in Silicon Valley. And so I've been very lucky to have lived in this amazing country for the last, it's 32 years. It's been a long time. Here at LinkedIn, we obviously care about, our vision is to create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce. And that includes every member of the US workforce. I think the world looks very different now than it did a year ago. The COVID-19 pandemic has impacted every part of our lives. One of the most challenging issues we face is how it's created a global unemployment crisis, and unemployment crisis here in the United States. To put the landscape into context, our colleagues at Microsoft estimate nearly 250 million jobs could be lost this year as a result of the pandemic. The International Labor Organization estimates another 1.6 billion vulnerable workers in unregulated and informal jobs are at risk. It's been a sharp and unevenly distributed recession. Many workers who were more protected, for unemployment or able to work remotely have kept their jobs, but a lot of other people have been impacted either because their jobs being impacted by public health restrictions or just demand being weak. Our data shows that women have been particularly impacted. Their share of hiring relative to men dipped globally in response to the shutdowns. Public data suggests they've left the workforce more than men have. Official data show that Black and Hispanic workers face unemployment rates far above white workers still. We've closed on that gap, and even Asian Americans who before COVID had a lower unemployment rate than the average currently have a higher unemployment rate than white Americans do. So while we've seen some recovery, and I think there are reasons to be somewhat optimistic that we'll gradually return to where we were before COVID, it's a tough world. You fast forward to the current recovery, it's unfolding in fits and starts. Lots of questions about fiscal stimulus, how all impacted groups fully participate in the recovery, which work trends in 2020 will last and will fade. We're going to be following this very closely. The good news and the reason we're optimistic at LinkedIn is we're projecting that there'll be 150 million new technology jobs created in the 5 years, from software development to IT support. I am really excited to dig into those opportunities and what we can do to help those who need it most. So thanks for having me here.
Thank you, Guy. And for our last panelist, I want to welcome Alex from ACRS and really give us a community perspective. Alex?
Thanks so much, Madeline, for having me on this panel. It's an honor to be here. So I work for Asian Counseling and Referral Service in Seattle, Washington, and we're a large human service organization. At ACRS, I am the Director of Employment and Citizenship Programs. So we are definitely working with clients whose worlds have changed dramatically in the last 3 years. In the last year, we do a huge amount of digital literacy programming and also citizenship programming. And I can definitely confirm what Guy is saying. I mean, obviously, when we're talking about the API community and the immigrant community in general, it's really important to disaggregate, right? We have, huge numbers of highly educated immigrants in the workforce with H-1Bs or people, PhDs, scientists, engineers, and then our clients who come here in search of a survival job. They need to learn English and they want to become citizens. So Our go-to sector of the economy before COVID was hospitality, because in Seattle, those jobs are now paying $17, $18, $19 an hour with tips, and they didn't require a whole lot of English. Obviously, hospitality has been rather, I would say, decimated by COVID. Hotels used to be at 95% occupancy in Seattle. The airport was crowded 24 hours a day. And all of the jobs that feed off of aviation, fueling planes, cleaning planes, making food for planes, cleaning hotel rooms, servicing banquets, servicing conventions, all of that is on hold. And so we have clients who are really hurting right now, and we've had to pivot and do all of our programming on online platforms. And I think we'll get into that a bit more later, but it's been quite a year. And our clients now need skills, digital literacy skills, as much as they need English. They're equally important. There's no one without the other. They're like completely inseparable. So that's my intro.
Thank you, Alex. I really want to start with Congressman Liu. Since March, tens of millions of Americans have lost their jobs, bringing the United States unemployment rate to its highest point since the Great Depression. You have been working on workforce issues since you were in the state legislature. So how has this issue changed or stayed the same since then, especially as it relates to the AAPI workforce?
Thank you for that question. Let me just give you a brief update on what's happening on Capitol Hill. Because of the pandemic and the loss of jobs, Congress did pass 4 laws earlier this year to provide relief to American people, direct stimulus checks. We also gave loans to small businesses as well as large businesses, and money to hospitals and states and counties. The House then passed a second round of stimulus because we believe that the scale of this pandemic was so large that the initial CARES Act was not enough. And it was $3.4 trillion called the HEROES Act on May 15th. Unfortunately, the Senate and the White House twiddled their thumbs for most of that time and didn't act. So we negotiated against ourselves and basically passed another version of 2.2 trillion. Again, the Senate and the White House didn't act, but now it looks like we could get a deal of about 908 billion, which I think is too small, but at least it's something and it's better than nothing. And we can try again with the Biden administration. So that's where we are right now. And in terms of how the world has changed, so clearly this pandemic changed a lot of things, and the panelists have laid that out. But the pandemic is not going to be with us forever. And so same time next year, we're not likely going to be doing this on Zoom. So once we get back to a relatively normal state, we're going to still face the consequences of having a workforce that isn't matched to the needs of many companies. And we know that with every passing year, technology becomes more and more important. We also know education becomes more and more important. We know that computer skills become more important. In the Obama administration, in my first term in Congress, I carried an Obama administration initiative to teach computer science to high school students. We couldn't get that through in terms of funding because Republicans blocked it at the time they controlled the House. But hopefully in the Biden administration, we can try that again and get funding out to the schools so they can teach computer languages. My view is computer skills should be taught just like any other foreign language. It's that important, and we need to make sure our students are equipped for the 21st century.
Thank you for that. Nari, I think you have a comment there.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in here because I could not agree more. We've done some internal, first of all, digital transformation, all the acceleration of everything digital was happening before COVID. I think that is definitely the truth. Our CEO, Satya Nadella, had said right at the beginning of the pandemic, we've had 2 years worth of digital transformation during the first 2 months of COVID. So it's almost like COVID's going to become the period when we truly did move into this new digital economy. And to that point, it's like it's just an accelerant. We did some internal calculations within Microsoft, and we've found that if there is maximum digital transformation through 2025 by industry, we think that there could be an opportunity for 150 additional jobs globally in cloud, in AI, security for developers. And it's really incumbent on, all of us policymakers, the private sector, NGOs to work together to really think about, can we leapfrog populations into those roles? And how do we start? I mean, I think that love the idea that computing as a language should be, a baseline for all US students in high schools. I mean, I think one of the programs that I think really that we've been activating around is our TEALS program. So we try to go into these high schools that don't offer computer science and then really build the capacity of teachers to one day teach computer science independently. We're in 500 schools, and actually Asian students are over enrolled in those TEAL schools. So approximately 7% of the school population is Asian, but then 17% of our TEALS classrooms in those schools are Asian API. But the issue is, again, to Alex's point, we have to disaggregate the data. Who are those Asian students? Are they generally East Asian? Are they male? I think we need to just do more to really dig in, because I think it's easy for us to kind of fall into like, Asians are fine, model minority, it's fine. But, Asians had 2.5% unemployment before COVID, and at the max, we're at 15% in the spring. And nobody talked about that really in the media. It was all about the impact on Black and Brown communities. So just generally, I think we need to take this approach of disaggregating the data, making sure that we start early with these digital skills, and don't leave the, we need to put the attention on the Asian community just like any other community.
Guy,
Yeah.
if I could get you to jump in here. I mean, a particular question that I have for you is, the challenges in the labor market as a result of COVID, which is what Naria touched upon a little bit. So what do you think we will need to do to look ahead for 2021?
That's a great question. So I actually want to step back a little bit, because I think that what's interesting about what COVID did is, I think we are very fortunate in that, our scientists and the scientists around the world are miracle workers, and have created a vaccine that seems to be a bunch of vaccines that are going to be super effective. They're going to be distributed more rapidly than a lot of people were expecting a year ago. And so we're going to be moving towards, if Dr. Fauci is correct, we're going to be moving to some semblance of normal, by this time next year, which is really great. And I think what this highlights is like, I think that when we reskill people, when we upskill people, when we teach them things that are super important, like digital literacy, we don't want to create skill sets that are really brittle or that keep people anchored in one specific layout of the world. I think what Alex said in the beginning, which is interesting, which is we had a lot of people that we thought like the future for them was to work in the hospitality industry, and this pandemic came out of left field and hit this industry we thought would be super resilient. Like, I don't think that was a bad strategy at all. I think that any industry could be hit by some unforeseen thing in the future. Building this resilience and building adaptability and building a system where people can fairly easily and quickly transition from industry to industry, from job to job, when these things happen, and they're going to continue to happen, whether it's technology or pandemics or other things. That's what's really important. I think what we need our educational system, our training system, our workforce systems to do is to allow people, that it's not like their future and their livelihoods are suddenly like thrown out of whack and their careers are derailed when a big unforeseen event, or even a small unforeseen event that affects them and their families happens. That's what's really important.
Thanks, Guy. I want to, Alex, I promise I will get to you. I know that Congressman Liu has to leave shortly. So one last question before you depart, Congressman. How can you, in your work in the Congress, ensure that the AAPI workforce, which we sometimes seem forgotten in so many other areas, how do we stay a priority during this crisis and as the new Congress starts in January?
So a couple of things. First, let me just talk a little bit about the API community. The Asian American community is the fastest increasing group in America, according to the US Census. And the Pew Research report a couple of years ago issued a study showing that there are now more immigrants from Asia to the United States than any other region in the world. And so this growth continues. And with every passing day, you get a more diverse America. One reason, by the way, that Donald Trump could not stop that is because we have immigration laws, and he was unable to change any of the laws because Congress held the House for Democrats. And so as a result, immigrants continue to come into the United States, and you have this greatly diversifying population. And then in terms of getting more people into jobs that employers actually want, one way is to provide incentives. So I introduced a new Jobs Act for creating tax incentives to companies to send people to get trained in cybersecurity. So there's a huge cybersecurity deficit in America, and we felt this was a good way to address two issues at once. Let's get more people trained with technical skills, and then specifically, let's get them trained in cybersecurity skills, and let's give companies a tax credit for doing that. So again, that's the New Collar Jobs Act, and hope you all take a look at it.
Thank you, Congressman. Alex, I want to give you the floor, especially with the work that you do at ACRS. Can you tell us a little bit about the clients that you serve?
Sure. So ACRS actually serves about 25,000 clients a year. In our employment program, we serve about 500. In our citizenship program, we serve about 700. Majority of our clients come from China, Vietnam, Cambodia, but we also serve a large number of East African clients, so clients from Ethiopia and Somalia as well as people seeking to naturalize from Iraq and elsewhere in Asia. So all over the world. Our programs basically serve people who need a survival job in employment. So about 4 years ago, we got a grant from Comcast to start a digital literacy program. Before that, we had just had a kind of a drop-in Friday class, which was like typing. I'm like, this is not going to cut it. We need a cumulative class with a curriculum with a dedicated instructor. So for the last 4 years, we had this class that was running in our really beautiful computer lab. And then in addition to all of our ESL and citizenship classes, then along came March and we closed down our building. And for like 2 weeks, we just kind of thought, well, we kind of thought we were going to be closed for 2 weeks, which is kind of weird looking back on that now. We were like, this is going to be really short. We're going to be back in the building really soon, but we're not. So we had to pivot and start offering all of our classes on different web-enabled platforms to a community that is basically most of our clients are very beginning speakers of English, have very limited digital literacy, and many did not have a device other than a smartphone. So I don't like to do much on a smartphone. Like I don't want to take a class on a smartphone. So the first order of business was distributing Chromebooks. Sorry, Naria, but we had a bunch already and they're really durable. And then we had to get hotspots. And then we had to figure out who had Wi-Fi. For those people who didn't have Wi-Fi, we had to get them hotspots. And then we had to figure out which platforms to start offering classes on. For our like intermediate English classes, that was doable. But for the level 1 and 2, first we thought, well, we're just going to offer like 30 minutes a week or maybe 30 minutes 2 times a week for the level 1 and 2 English classes. But once they started on Teams, actually, they loved it. And they wanted more. So the closures happened at the end of our winter quarter. By the middle of spring quarter, so by like April, we were offering 4-day-a-week classes for 1 to 2 hours a day on these platforms. And so getting people comfortable with using either Teams or Zoom has been that was the primary thing that we had to figure out. And once we did, we realized like people were just their digital literacy skills were increasing, like I've seen with my son. He can master things. He's a middle schooler. He's at home. He's doing everything online. Our adult students also mastered things more quickly than they ever would have before. We used to have a time for English and a time for take out your computers. Nothing works like that anymore. Everything is interwoven. The foundational digital literacy skills are the portal through which absolutely everything else is done. So our clients are limited English, low income, limited digital literacy skills, and we've had to wrap all that up and figure out how to reach them and reach them well remotely. And I think that they've exceeded all of our expectations in their ability to do that.
That is so great to hear. I think that, prior to the pandemic, we were already talking about automation and the potential of that eliminating huge swaths of jobs. So, posing this question to Guy, what skills do we need to focus on in building in the workforce to make workers more resilient?
It's a great question, Madeline. I would emphasize that a lot of these are really foundational skills. They're the skills that we've thought for a long time are necessary to be a part of a successful workforce. I mean, whether it's what we think of sometimes as soft skills, communication, written, spoken. I think mathematics skills that are very foundational that we teach in primary and secondary school, and like this group has discussed. Now we need more digital skills. These digital skills are not necessarily the fancy things that we sometimes talk about. This isn't about learning to be an AI specialist or anything like that. A lot of these things like AI that we talk about are going to gradually be democratized and turned into tools that lots of people use, much like I don't want to speak for everybody in this group. I don't know how to build how a smartphone works, but I use my smartphone all the time. I'm sure people here that have teenage kids that have their own smartphones, maybe you train them in how to build a smartphone, but probably not, yet they know how to use it far more advanced than I can. And I think that's what's really important, is that kind of fluency is what we need to build. It's going to be a part of the workforce, whether people are working in tech jobs or not. I am very confident that even as technology transforms the economy, there will be jobs for human beings to do for the rest of our lifetimes. I don't worry about technology as something that just suddenly eliminates a job, but it is going to change things. And the more we can make people adaptable, able to learn new things so that they can continue to adapt along the technology, the better. And that's what we really need.
Thank you. Congressman Liu, I know that you need to head out. So are there any last words you would like to share before you depart?
Let me just, first of all, thank you again for having me on this distinguished panel. And let me just leave with some words of hope. We do know that the vaccines are being rolled out. Pfizer has a vaccine that's had very successful trials. Moderna has a vaccine that's very successful trials. There are going to be other ones that are be coming along. And so this pandemic is going to end, and we're going to be back to normal. And I look forward to working with all of you as we continue to make America an even better place to live, work, and play. So thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you, Congressman. Naria, I just want to go back to the original question about the skills. I think some of that also, we think about the fact that this is going to be a huge generational question as well. I'm a Gen Xer. I think I exhibit a lot of millennial technology skills, but I think in regards to the work that Microsoft does, how do you think this pandemic will influence the U.S. workforce in the next generation?
Oh, that's a great question. And I also wanted to just note and call out some of those policy solutions that the Congressman pointed out were just really interesting, and a really great way for, industry, private sector to say, here are the roles that we really need, and then figuring out how to continue to train people for those roles, like that cybersecurity program was just really fascinating. So I think that one point is like, how can we, in this period where we're emerging from a crisis, think about those new solutions like that. So just wanted to +1 on that really quickly. I am also a Gen Xer. And my kids are now like, oh, Mom, you don't know how to use anything. Get out of here. You're like a boomer. I'm like, I'm not a boomer. But I mean, it's a really, I think I just want to underline it and also support what Guy was saying, that, in the future, right, every job will be a digital job. I had previously stated that we saw 150 jobs globally growing if we have digital transformation. Is actually 150 million. So it's a significant number. But even if they're not in those specific tech kind of roles, every job will be a digital job. And at the end of the day, obviously it's those digital literacy and foundational skills that Alex mentioned too, but it is truly about learning how to learn continuously that I think we need to keep focusing on, because the technology will continue to change, the problems will continue to change. And if you teach that growth mindset first, I think that is the way that we have kind of like future-proof our skills. And so just, I completely agree with that. So that's why a lot of the times when we fund nonprofits and we provide them with digital skilling content and grants, why we do that is because we know the nonprofits like the ACRSs of the world, they're the ones that are doing the wraparound services, the support services, teaching resiliency, so that, you know, it's both of those things working together that I think can really help us, you know, address this workforce and move the workforce forward. And I know I spoke a lot, but one last thing I want to say is that connectivity is really, really important too. And I think we've been touching on the outskirts of it here, but you know, our president, Brad Smith, often says that broadband is the new electricity, and yet half of the population around the world, 25 million people in the US, don't have broadband access. And we now know what that means. People can't live and work. So I think that's just another issue that we also need to, not a skill, but a system that we need to really figure out together.
Yes, and that's something that I know the API community is very interested in regards to making sure that it's accessible to the community and being able to, you know, do everyday things. Alex, I think this is a great pivot to you just because of your explanation of the clients that you serve. You know, they come from different generations, different backgrounds, and different experiences. So what do you think the next generation is doing in regards to that, to the things that you're helping them learn now to pass on in your work?
So when we pivoted in March, one of the first questions we would ask is there a teenager in the house? Because we knew if there was a teenager in the house, we didn't have to send a case manager, right? Because the teenager would be like, give me the Chromebook, I'll get you on the Wi-Fi. Because teaching someone how to get on Wi-Fi over the phone is really unpleasant. Like you can share a screen, but you can't share a screen if they can't get on Wi-Fi. So you're like, do you see the little thing? And it's like, get your teenager. Okay, if they didn't have a teenager in the house, then the case manager would try to go to the house and meet outside the house, because obviously we're not supposed to be getting close to people right now. And we can't put anyone at risk, case managers or clients. If we determined after that they didn't have Wi-Fi, then we would get the hotspots, and the hotspots really have been a lifesaver. But so much of what we do depends on how old the client is when they come to the United States, how much education they had in their native country, and how much English they know. If they were a college graduate in their native country and they really don't know any English, still things could maybe go faster. If they really had quite limited education in their native country and they're older when they come here, there's a different trajectory. I would never try to limit anyone's plans, but they may be more comfortable with working the hard survival job for longer and putting so much hope and faith in their children. And we don't tell them that that's wrong. But we really try to determine where people are when they come here. And that has made a huge impact in terms of their being able to get online. Now I see that before we start a class. So my program, Madeline, only works with adults. We also have like a youth programming department, but that's not what I do. But so all of our clients are 18 plus. But now before we start a new class, I see that everyone's having a Teams prep class. And I was like, what is Teams prep? And they're like, oh, that's when we meet with people before the first day of class to get them comfortable using Teams so that the first day of class isn't chaos. And then we have instructors, and then we have case managers in the wings on the first day of class just to make sure that things are going well. So the instructor's texting the case manager saying, I can't, so-and-so is having trouble getting on. So-and-so is not here, but they were supposed to be here. Can you call them and speak to them in their native language and help get them through this? So we have like all hands on deck, and we tried, and usually you can hear teenagers also helping their parents in the background, but my clients are adults. So I have seen so many times over, again, my own son came and I'm like, why are these Teams announcements? Why is the chat always coming across my screen? That's super distracting. And he was like, let me show you how to fix that. I hadn't been able to figure that out. So there's different levels that people learn things more quickly depending on how much apprehension they have about a thing too. It used to be that the thing that stressed our clients out most was having to speak English over the phone. So we would pretend to do that. Now they have to do job interviews over Zoom, and they're doing it. This is the way they apply for and get jobs now. And we had to get them comfortable doing that, and they've done it. They know how to do it now. So I'm not sure I completely answered your question, except if you have a teenager in the house, ask them for help. And if you don't, then we'll come and help you.
You definitely did, and I think
Okay.
this is a testament to resiliency and
Yes.
people who know that they are here in a place where they can find you as a resource, and so you are serving the community. So this next question I would love each of you to address, because you all service different types of people, and goals are slightly different. What is the single biggest issue in education or workforce training that you think will define the future of work? So Guy, I'll start with you.
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to be like super near term to start answering it. I think that this crisis we have, and this is going to continue for at least a few, 5 or 6 more months till vaccinations become widespread and potentially, post exist the crisis. Childcare, the fact that people have to, that work have to choose, or that want to work have a choice between like paying the rent or having their kids taken care of. I think this is a huge problem, and it, some of it pre-exists the crisis become very acute now. It's one of the reasons many women have had to exit the workforce even as the economy has recovered. So we have to solve this problem in this country, and I mean probably internationally, but it seems like this problem is particularly acute in the United States. Beyond that, I think what we need to figure out is how to find ways for people to acquire the skills in a cost-effective way. I'm somebody who is a big believer in the four-year university. I attended it. Many people in my family that have. I know there are plenty of people are not able to afford it. It does not seem to. We either need to figure out how to make more people like enter this in an affordable way that doesn't result in them acquiring huge debt burdens, and I think that's part of the solution, or find other ways that people can acquire skills, credentials, smaller degrees, associate degrees, to acquire the skills they need to build the networks they need to succeed in the workforce, because it's a lot of what going to college or to graduate school is like. And I think it needs a holistic solution, but I think we need to figure out this problem, because to my mind, what we thought in 2008, which was just send everybody to college to acquire debt, but then be able to easily pay it off, that's not working out. And I think like now we have a lot of people that are stuck with large debt burdens they're struggling to repay. We can't do that again.
Naria?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree wholeheartedly with both of those points. And, I think just to add on a bit there, I think that in the future, we'll have to continue to think about who is responsible for skilling and at what point. I do think that there is, just to kind of bring in a different player on here, but what role will employers have in really continuing to upskill the people that work that are employees? I do think there will be, I know that we historically there was a lot more training in the 80s when like the computer, the PC was just first online, where employers were actually paying to upskill and having the opportunities for their employees to learn this new technology, and that has since waned in the last few decades. And so is there a way for employers to those roles that may become automated, how can employers continue to upskill them? So that's one piece. And then really that other piece about affordability for education, especially here in the US, like Guy said. And I love that the concept of these micro credentials and how can we have continuous like learning that you can do and signal the acquisition of those skills. But in order for that to work, we need to really change the employer regime. Like those need to be valuable and accepted modes, or else we're just going to have a system that has more inequality, where some people won't be able to get that four-year degree. They'll skill on these certifications, and yet the employers won't accept them. It needs to be done like collectively and together.
Alex?
Yeah, so I would just add, this is definitely, we're in like a tale of two cities here in the Seattle COVID economy. I mean, there's the housing costs are as high as ever. People are making, all cash purchases of homes above asking. The tech economy hasn't really been that hurt. What we've seen is the sectors that our clients are in, and that people without college degrees have been disproportionately impacted, as we said, and impacted by losing their jobs and impacted by COVID, because they can't work from home because they live in more crowded housing, generational homes. So that's, it's troubling to me. And unfortunately, as like working with employers, as Nari mentioned, we don't have as much leverage when the unemployment rate is high in entry-level jobs. I can't, in a full employment economy, I could ask employers about, what about doing some on-site ESL? What about doing some on-site digital literacy? What about upskilling your own people? I lose that leverage in a down economy. You can't really, it's just a fact. You don't have that much pull when they have a long line of people waiting for the job that they used to have trouble filling. And so absent government policy, I'm not quite sure what we can do. In the meantime, again, as Naria said, we need much more money for training programs for people, particularly to pursue associate degrees and certificates below associate degrees, which have been shown to have, if you get like a 3-month or a 6-month credential certificate, you will have, it has a big impact on your earning potential. It's hard for us to get our clients into those kind of programs because it basically requires them to be finished with the ESL. But money for training is so important because I don't want our clients borrowing money. If you're going to make $15, $16, $17 an hour, I don't want you going into several $1,000s of debt to pay for your credential, because it's taking money out of paying for your basic necessities for your family. So we need more government training dollars so that people can work and go to school at the same time. That's the best formula for our clients. They don't have a safety net. They can't just say, I'm going to go to 4-year college. I don't need any money coming in. They don't have that luxury. So what I really want is more money, more, grants for low-income people so they can get training, Pell grants, different financial aid programs so that they don't have to borrow. The other thing is, as Congressman Li was mentioning, we desperately need an expansion of unemployment insurance. So unemployment pays you a portion of what you were making without the extra $600 in a week in the federal unemployment. State unemployment insurance gives you somewhere between half and 2/3 of what you're making before. If you were making $16 an hour, like how could you possibly make ends meet on half of that? So we really need a government policy that focuses on where low wage workers are. This is through no fault of their own. They're legally working in the United States and they played by all the rules. But if unemployment gives you back 50% of what you were making before and you don't have any job prospects because no one is flying, we need to think about how dire those situations are for people in the same city where people are queuing, where people are paying all cash for homes, they're queuing up for food. So we really have an inequality problem that we need more government programs to target.
I appreciate all of your insight on the subject. We have some questions from the audience, and I encourage those of you who are watching to put your questions in the comment section if you're watching on Facebook, and in the Q&A chat box there. One question being asked: are there any resources that is offered to improve digital literacy skills? So Nari, I'll start with you and see if you have something that you want to drop in the chat to share with folks. That might be a website or a link. Feel free.
Yes, we have something, and this is was something that we have collectively pulled together with LinkedIn and GitHub. We launched in this in June, end of June, June 30th. It's an initiative to help, I think I alluded to it earlier, 25 million people gain more digital skills for this COVID economy. So we've used the LinkedIn economic graph to pull together the top 10 job roles that are in demand, growing, achievable without necessarily that degree. And we have, in partnership with LinkedIn, unlocked the content and made that available for free. So there are 10 learning paths. There are, hundreds of hours of courses ranging from customer service specialist all the way up to computer developer and programmers. All that content, you can find that at opportunity.linkedin.com, and I'll drop that into the chat as well to start your learning journey. Also, there is content and learning paths around critical professional skills, as well, the soft skills, as well as how to find a job in tough economic times, some diversity and inclusion pathways, and then LinkedIn had just made available the fastest growing skills and kind of free content there as well. We've also are connecting that into our Microsoft Learn. So this is on our kind of the Microsoft technology. So all of that content is available for free, and then a low cost certification. So to Alex's point about, that industry recognized cert, for only $15, we've unlocked 13 of those certifications. So I'll drop in, the fastest way to find it is to go to opportunity.linkedin.com. And, if it's not you on this call, maybe it's somebody that that could benefit from the skilling. I myself have started the project management pathway. So it's useful for everyone.
Excellent resources. Guy or Alex, do you have anything else to add?
Well, I just want to thank Naria for that amazing plug for our partnership with Microsoft and with GitHub. I think we also have a career explorer tool, by the way, that is great for potentially exploring what skills you would need for various jobs you're potentially interested in. One thing you will notice as you look at it is, these digital skills start cropping. We didn't have a career explorer tool 20 years ago, but like you're going to see a lot more of these in a lot more jobs than you used to. And I suspect when we refresh this in a few years, it'll be even more so. So I think it's just a great tool for finding out for whatever job you're looking, what kind of skills you need to acquire, and then acquire them via, these learning paths or, your university, community college education, whatever it is. I think it's a useful tool.
I don't know that I have resources to offer. I'd love to be able to continue to offer our 10-week digital literacy class. Naria, our funding is coming to an end from Comcast. I don't know if you guys, I'll just make a shameless plug. I also would like to offer a level 2 digital literacy class at ACRS, because there's a big difference between knowing how to have a Gmail, remembering your password, which is a big challenge, navigating search engines, and using a platform like LinkedIn. Like LinkedIn, I would consider to be an advanced skill. Like that's a level 2. That is not something that our intro students are doing, but it's something that they need to be able to do if they're going to be able to move into another area of jobs. So I would love to, we serve about 60 clients a year in our digital literacy classes at ACRS, and I'd love to like double that, triple that. I think there's so much need for it in the community. We could do all kinds of things, but for now, we're just going to continue to do what we're doing online for the foreseeable future, and try to do the best that we can to meet the needs of people who need to get jobs now in a very different economy.
One of the questions that was proposed from the audience, a big part of the conversation today has been about tech and digital skills. Aside from these hard skills, what are examples of soft skills that may not be as intuitive to AAPI people due to culture that AAPI people should sharpen to progress in predominantly non-Hispanic white work environments? I think also with digital skills, I think I have found with the change of everything online that that human interaction and connection and engagement has been a little bit more challenging than when we do things in person. And so in terms of work environment and the soft skills that we get to practice because we're actually engaging with people in person, how do you think this affects folks who are trying to improve their digital literacy? I know it's an interesting question for something that, focuses on tech. So I'll leave that up to see if someone wants to take a shot at it.
Can I take a crack at it? I think it's like a really interesting question, because soft skills, I often have people come to me and say, I hate that people call them soft skills. They're just as important as hard skills. I think it's 100% true. A lot of these are sort of, we do have things like, public speaking workshops and stuff. But like we kind of don't really think hard about how people learn these skills. And I think we probably need a little more direct investment even early in like high school and junior high, just teach people those skills. But like, if you're interested in how you can pick it up, you're already in the workforce. Go to things like, like conferences or get-togethers for your job, like industry events where you like network with people, get to know them, like get to practice that listening skills, like write more and read more about things that are going on in your industry. Those are like I think the most essential soft skills that you can learn on your own. Like build up your teamwork skills. Like a lot of this stuff, to be honest, and some of you guys that are listening are actually in learning right now, whether in a community college or university or high school, I don't know, like, work on problem sets, with your fellow students. Like, things allow you to really learn how to work with people. These are so essential in the workforce, and you have an opportunity to learn them even if there's no set coursework for it.
I would say for our clients, and this is, it's really, our clients are a little shy in two areas. They are not great at bragging. Americans, I would say, Americans born people, we know how to brag, right? This is what I have found, and this is a huge generalization, but in the Asian cultures that I've worked with, people are uncomfortable bragging. This is not, and we talk about how in interviews, you really do have to try to put yourself out there and say the things that you're really good at, say the things that differentiate you from other people. So these are things that we practice. These are American skills. Also, people are fearful of making mistakes in speaking. And you're going to make mistakes in speaking when you're learning another language. So we just have to, for our really beginning English students, we just have to try to get them to practice and practice over and over again. And some of the pronunciations are so tricky, and we laugh and there's no judgment. But there's two things that we just have to keep encouraging, nudging people to do, is to be willing to, when you have an interview, you must be able to say what you're good at and say it proudly. And when you're speaking English, you will make mistakes, and we make mistakes and we get better, and to kind of destigmatize that. So those are two things that, and it's more pronounced online because we have these weird interfaces between us and other human beings. When in a classroom, we can reach out and touch someone and say, that's okay, I do that too, or whatever it is. But we're working on it, but it makes, these are challenges that, that I'm just aware of.
Yeah, and just to finish up off too, I mean, I definitely agree with both Guy and Alex. I think one way that I like to think about it is the skill of networking. You know, I know LinkedIn has an awesome program called +1, where it's about like, don't just grow your own network with the people that you already know, but like open up your network to one person who is like different than you, has a different background. And I think this is kind of the thing that fits in with like, you know, we often in the really great benefit is in some of our Asian communities, you're tightly knit, you know, you're going to the churches together, the community centers together, and that community is vibrant internally. But then how do you make those networks outside of those communities and really push to do that? And I think that plays into all of these soft skills, you know, critical thinking, being a little braggadocious, like Alex said, all of these things. So, I mean, how do we, number one, you know, if you look at your network, I think a call to action for this group is like, can you open up your network to one person who needs an opportunity, and who can you network with? And then getting to your point, Madeline, like super hard to do that when we're all virtual. And I think we're starting to see some research about the impact of remote work and, you know, having the screen and losing this human touch and contact. And I think, you know, right now, a lot of us are in this mentality of like, this is just for now. But I think, honestly, I think it's going to be for a while. And I think we're going to completely change the way that work happens. And so we need to continue to think about, how do we build community? How do we connect with people when a lot of our work is done like this in a virtual environment? And think about our mental health and taking care of ourselves and taking care of our communities.
Absolutely. We have a few minutes left. We started a little bit late, and so I want to just give everyone an opportunity to say a few words if they want to close with any last comments. So Alex, I'll start with you.
I'm just trying to figure out how we can best help our clients invest in themselves during this time. There are a lot of warehouse and distribution jobs, as we all know, but that's not for everybody. And some people are able to take a little bit of time out of the labor market. And so we're just trying to figure out how we can help people build their skills to the best of their ability now. What we do is we plan for the immediate job, and we really try to encourage people to then plan for the career and figure out how we can get them there. That's what we do. That's why I, do this work. I want people to have choices. I want people to work in safe places. I want people to have dignity and respect in their work. I want them to be able to be paid fairly. And that is easier to achieve when you have some level of English and digital literacy. So that's what we're doing. And I think that's what we're going to be continuing to do. for the next few months while it's not that easy to get the survival job.
Thank you, Alex. Guy?
Thank you so much to Apex for letting me participate in this panel with these amazing panelists. I guess this has been a really hard year for everyone, and I expect for many people on this call. So I want to acknowledge that. I think that next year's gonna be better, and the one after that is gonna be better. I think that what the world that is gonna come out of this is gonna be a world that's gonna share, is not gonna be probably quite as challenging as the current one, but is gonna share the challenges we had before COVID hit. People are still gonna be vulnerable to the next negative surprise that comes, either within their personal career lives or within the economy as a whole. And like, I hope we can build a world where that one bad event that happens isn't, a life changer, but just something that people are able to, through resources, help from the government, help from their employee, make it past it. Like, hopefully many people have this time. So again, I think that's what we should all think about in this space, is like how we can build that resilience, provide that safety net to people, whether it's through government policy, through individual learning, through employee policies, through education, that allow us to build that resilient and secure world.
Thank you. And Nari, I'll let you close this out.
Okay, and again, thank you. And thank you for being a great moderator today too, Madeline. Okay, so I think that there were some things in the pre-COVID world that were, great. I think there are some things that were not good, and we should let go of those and build back a different future. Really, truly one that's inclusive. Let's break some of these molds. Let's, shift our thinking, partner in different ways. How amazing is it that we're going to have a Black and Asian American vice president? Can we continue to think about ways that we have Asian Americans represented? Because, it is really incumbent on, to have leaders in place. And that's why I love the work of this organization and what you're doing to cultivate that leadership. So let's, I do think next year will be different, but let's really, take this moment to crack it open and have a whole different, more equitable future.
What a great way to end this panel. I gotta, give that big clap of applause there for that, Naria. Thank you so much. A big thank you to all of our panelists for joining us. Congressman Liu, unfortunately, had to depart a little bit early. We really appreciate you taking the time to participate in this conversation and sharing your insights and resources. So folks who are on the chat, please use the link that Naria put in the box, opportunity.linkedin.com. opportunity.linkedin.com and use those resources. Go visit ACRS and see all the great work that they are doing. We were privileged to be able to be a partner with them in an event that we did in Seattle and where they hosted us. And so they are an excellent organization, really working with the AAPI community. And we are so proud of all the work that they're doing in service to our community. Thank you to Microsoft for all of the continued support. And we hope everyone enjoys the rest of their evening. Thanks so much for tuning in tonight.
Bye-bye. Thank you for having me.